Today, we will be doing a crash course of Dr. Paul Dobransky's Mind Operating System program. Dr. Dobransky's Mind OS program is a unified theory of psychology delivered in common, everyday language. When Dr. Dobransky was in residency training for psychiatry, he was dumbfounded by how difficult the science literature is to read for average people. He found that much of the self-help on the market wasn't backed by any real science, making it difficult for ordinary people to successfully use the ideas. Out of frustration, Dr. Dobransky developed his Mind OS approach to explaining psychology in common, everyday language. Additionally, Dr. Dobransky created diagrams to illustrate concepts, helping to bring the learning home so that we are all able to solve personal, professional, and group problems more efficiently and effectively. I have dropped in anecdotes and exercises into the training to help make the ideas more directly relatable to life on Guam. I have crafted this training with students, parents, and professional educators in mind. However, the ideas presented here are universal and useful for anyone who would like to improve the world we share. We start by asking, what is life? How can we define life in a way that includes everything? Trees and birds, bugs, cats, horses, humans, lobsters, turtles. What definition do we all share in common? For this, we turn to biologists who say that life is irritable. A living thing is defined as an entity that is impacted by the environment's stress and then makes a purposeful response to that stress. This implies that a decision has been made. Therefore, the only thing that all living things have in common is that we make decisions. Although we might not recognize it as consciousness, even trees make a decision to grow toward the light. A frog makes a decision to hop away from a predator. We may call this instinct, but it is still a decision based on a deep sense of knowing. What does not make a decision are rocks. Rocks are passive and completely at the mercy of gravity. Given any current mental state, we have two choices to choose from: be active and do something, or be passive and do nothing. If we are active, then we have another choice to make. We can choose to be constructive or destructive. Being active and making decisions, any decision, is the arena of psychological growth. Being passive and making no decision at all leads to psychological atrophy that can lead to depression, regression, or further decline. Like a rock, subject to the whims of gravity. This diagram explains the importance of decisions in defining one person's life as different from every other person on earth. This is how each one of us becomes who we are. We are each the sum total of every decision we have ever made or didn't make. And our future will be determined by every decision we make moving forward. In psychiatry training, there is a model called the biopsychosocial model. This model says that the source of all psychological problems stem from either our brain's biology, or hardware, its style of emotion, what we call psychology, or it can be thought of as software, or from social reasons like divorce, bankruptcy, or COVID-19. For our purposes, we are going to substitute the word stress for the word social and define stress to mean a negative emotional energy coming at you from outside of your personal boundary. Again, stress, for our purposes, is a negative emotional energy coming at you from outside of your personal boundary. In today's lesson, we will be doing a deep dive, educating ourselves in psychology in such a way that we can use it in our daily lives to manage stress. By learning this system, we will also be able to teach this model to our students and colleagues. Our society has major problems with drugs, alcohol, obesity, and violence, which, in my opinion, stems from a failure to acknowledge and fully heal from trauma suffered during the Spanish occupation and World War II. Let's not sugarcoat it. This community has been brutalized by Spanish and Japanese occupational forces. Unhealthy coping behaviors have been developed and are passed on from generation to generation by way of learned behaviors rooted in psychological style and decision making. The goal of this training is to present a clear, concise, and complete model of psychology so that we can interrupt the patterns of the past and be better prepared for present and future stresses. This is not therapy, and this is no substitute for therapy. However, it may be therapeutic and useful to your emotional and intellectual growth. This diagram explains the intimate connection between biology, which is our brain chemistry, psychology, a person's style of emotion, and stress, which comes from the outside world. If we were computers, our brain would be the hardware, our psychology is the software, and stress could be viruses or other nefarious entities in cyberspace. We, as the users, get to determine what programs we install and download to become our psychology. At any time, if we don't like the factory settings of our thinking, we can upgrade our software by learning new things about how to become the best version of ourselves possible. Stress is a negative emotional energy in our environment that comes at us from the outside world. The only cure for stress is to make a decision about it. Decide to think about the stress differently. Stay in the environment but use a thicker skin against it, or else decide to leave and get out of this stressful environment altogether. If you don't decide what to do about stress in your life, staying in it will sooner or later start to hurt you psychologically. Not making a decision about changing a stressful situation is making a decision to let the world change you and decide for you. People who are in stressful environments long enough will start to take on the characteristics of the stress and become increasingly pessimistic people. It is as if our software, our thinking, is being reprogrammed to be more negative and therefore less efficient. The only way to fix the problem is to reprogram our minds through therapy or education, like overriding the factory settings on our phones so that we can use it the way we want to use it. When our biology gets impacted by a problem, things are very far along toward impairment or disease. Think about getting a computer virus and not doing anything about it. If we leave it on our computer long enough, we'll start to see that our software doesn't work as well. If we continue to ignore the problem, the hardware may fail and we may have to buy new parts for our computer. This would be like getting medication from a psychiatrist. However, if you still have the same bad software on your system or the same virus, it will continue to affect the brand new hardware you just installed. Medication alone cannot fix problems that are rooted in the decision making that drives a psychological style. Stress does and will affect our psychology. What we want to do is have a common model and language of psychology so that each one of us can better manage stress before it becomes a problem. We are in unheralded times and experiencing stress in historic proportions. The Mind OS model isn't just useful for individuals, but is useful for organizations, families, businesses, and schools. A school, for example, has a physical property and assets inside. There is a culture of group psychology inside of its walls, with all the ideas, rules, the mission and vision statement, shared values among members, history, and a human spirit that all define the school psychology. Everything we learn here today will help each one of us, and therefore our schools, be the best possible version of themselves. I also want to note that taking care of our physical health is fundamental to having good mental health and being prepared to handle stress. If we do not take care of our health, we will be required to take care of our illness. When I tell people I spent $600 taking a test that measures how my body is processing nutrients so that I might purchase supplements that are perfect for me, they almost always say, "Oh my God, that's so expensive." But then I have to ask them, compared to what? How much did you spend this past year on alcohol, cigarettes, vapes, fast food? Have you checked the price on cancer? Yes, it can be expensive to be healthy, but it can also be very expensive to be sick. And I'll say that again. If we do not take care of our health, we will be required to take care of our illness. There are no guarantees in life, but taking care of our health puts us in the best position to find happiness, success, and freedom. Now let's get to it. What we have learned so far is that we are the ones who define life through the decisions we make. The quality of our lives is none other than the sum total of all the decisions we have ever made. All we ever needed to know is exactly what the best options are for using our inner psychology against stress. All we ever needed to know is how to program the thinking inside us to perfectly match the situations that come our way, to solve the problems of life as perfectly as possible. To do this, we must have an awareness and a mastery of psychology. Fundamentally, there are just 4 parts to psychology. We have the personal boundary, emotional energy, which is composed of either positive energy called self-esteem, or negative energy we call anger or anxiety. We have the part of psychology that's the intellect, and this is the data in us. And this can include beliefs, values, history, education, and experience. And finally, we have decision making. If we master emotional energy, we get happiness. When we master intellect, beliefs, and ideas, we get success. When we master decision making, we get freedom. When we master the personal boundary, we get strength and resilience. When we master all 4, we can experience a high level of satisfaction in life that we call durable fulfillment, lasting happiness, lasting success, and lasting freedom. Some of you may have experienced this when you graduated from elementary, middle, high school, or college. Maybe on your wedding day or when your child was born. You felt happy, free, and successful all at the same time, what we call fulfillment. How long it lasted is a function of boundaries. By separating psychology into 4 parts, we can successfully troubleshoot and problem solve areas of our life that are not working like we want them to. If we don't have the kind of happiness we want, we know to examine our emotional energy. If we don't have the success we'd like, we can examine what is missing from our intellect, beliefs, and data spectrum. If we aren't happy with our current level of freedom, then we can know that it is a decision-making issue. If our peak moments, like the feeling we get when we win a game or graduate, are fleeting and don't last, then we know we have a personal boundary issue. Note that if the problems are vague in nature, like weakness, feeling overwhelmed, or feeling off, things that don't fit into categories of unhappiness, failure, or feeling trapped, these are all boundary issues. With this model, we must be able to observe ourselves in real time and analyze our problems. It is like being our own life coach. This skill is called observing ego. Before we can master observing ego, we must first talk about how time works. We all have this limited amount of what we call time. No matter what we do, we can't make more of it. We only have 24 hours in a day and a life expectancy of about 80 years. We can always get more freedom by quitting a dead-end job or a failed relationship. We can always get more emotional energy by connecting with new friends or family. Or we can get more intellect by coming to school or traveling. Time is a psychological currency we trade, and we need to learn to use it wisely. The mindset of the present moment is step 1 to solving any problem. There are 3 ways that we can spend time: in the past, the present, or the future. And when I say spend time, I mean direct our attention. Where are our thoughts focused? Is it on the past? Are they focused on the present? Or are our thoughts being focused on the future? Is our attention focused on what we want, what we had, or what we have? How many of us have ever gotten into the car and before we knew it, without much thought at all, we were at our destination? How did we get there without consciously deciding to turn the wheel this way or that way? We were on what we call autopilot, or zoned out, for the duration of the trip. We were driving our car by habit while our mind wandered off into the past or the future, reviewing the past or daydreaming about the future. Had we been in the present moment, we may have noticed details of the trip, such as the color of the sky or the bumper stickers on the cars in front of us. This notion of time is critical for several reasons. Number one, time is always being spent. There is no saving time. The earth doesn't stop rotating for any one of us. The idea of saving time is a false belief. Whether we use our time to create a life we've always dreamed of or not, the time is spent. Once the time has passed, we can never get it back. We can make decisions about being more efficient with our time and being more purposeful with how we spend our time, but we cannot save time. We can only make decisions in the present moment mindset. When we are in a past or future mindset, we are less alive. We are most alive when we are living in the present moment. Make no mistake, we need the ability to review our past so that we can learn from history, and we need future thinking so that we can plan and set goals and avoid harm. The past gives us the notion of what is probable in life, and the future gives us a sense of what is possible based on our many present choices. Number three, we can only take an action in the present moment. It is impossible to take an action in the past that's gone or in the future that has not yet arrived to become a present moment. We can only use our five senses in the present moment. We can remember how something felt in the past, but we can only touch it in the present moment. We can remember or imagine what someone might look like in the past or the future, but we can only see them in the present moment. Intimacy, number five. The true feeling of being seen, being known, being heard, being understood, and being acknowledged only happens in a present moment mindset. Intimacy is to know that someone else knows what it feels like to be us. Don't get me wrong. I certainly advocate for planning for the future, but optimists can't predict the future any better than pessimists. So the best we can be is mindful of each moment, aware of our past, and creating a future with each decision we make. Trust that when we do our best every time, good things will happen for us. Even if things are hard right now, remember, it takes time for trees to grow, and it takes time for us to grow. Number six. Finally, there is one more thing that can be done in the present moment. One of the most powerful learned human skills available. This skill is what allows human beings to grow and change. This skill is called observing ego. Observing ego is the ability to step outside of ourselves and look back, make an assessment of how we are doing in life as it is happening and as we continue to live our lives. Observing ego is noticing how we spend our time, how we give our love, how we receive love, and recognizing where we feel free and where we feel trapped. It is also recognizing our role in contributing to these experiences. For example, if I was in an argument with another person, we were there fighting. Observing ego allows me to step back and notice that my stomach is tight, my jaw is clenched, my breathing is restricted. I can conclude that I am experiencing anger. With this awareness, I can then ask myself, is all this arguing getting me anywhere? Is this what I want to be doing with my time? So I continue to fight and observe that no, this isn't going anywhere. I can then make the decision to stop, end the fight, and save my energy. Observing ego is this powerful skill that allows us to observe ourselves while we are making decisions and spending time, and redirect our energy to what is truly important and inspires us. Without observing ego, anger would continue to build, and the fight I just described might last for decades. Please note, nothing about today's training is about being a perfect person. There is no such thing. The goal of today's training is to help you be the best possible version of yourself so that you can have a life that you've always dreamed about. So we're now going to turn to the personal boundary. I always like to sum up the personal boundary with not my circus, not my clowns. Summarize the idea of knowing what we control and what we don't control. In every human problem, whether personal, financial, economic, family, relationships, COVID-19 pandemic, there are always some portion that is in our control, what we say, inside our personal boundary, and another portion which is out of our control, what we say is outside our personal boundary. Our personal boundary marks what we control from what we don't. When we have a solid personal boundary, we can clearly see what we control in any problem from what we don't. The beginning of solving problems then becomes easy. Let go of what we do not control and focus on what we do control. We will find that mature personal boundaries will solve a great deal of what make up our problems in life. I do want to acknowledge that as children, it is our parents and other adults' job in the community to help set boundaries for us. These are oftentimes called rules. Some things can only be learned from experience, and until you reach the age of 18, adults are here to help keep you from making mistakes that will harm you permanently. Rules are not here because adults want to ruin your life and make you feel trapped. The rules are here to help set you up for success and keep you from hurting yourself or others in ways that you didn't plan for or think about. We want to help children to not make mistakes that are permanent. The personal boundary is a solution for two kinds of problems in life. Problems that need strength and durability, and problems that are vague in nature. Problems that are vague in nature are identified by words like stressed, overwhelmed, crisis, should. When we burn emotional energy on things outside of our boundary, those things that we don't control, it is called suffering. We can't control if mom or dad allows us to go out with our friends. To stay upset about it is suffering. The personal boundary is like the fence around our school. We and our decision-making are the gatekeepers to what ideas we accept and reject, what decisions we do or don't make, and how we respond to stress in the environment. The personal boundary allows us to accept constructive deals and reject destructive deals. The personal boundary also helps to protect our positive emotions by keeping stress out. When a person has a lot of holes in their boundary, problems will seem to find ways in without any effort. Like a school without a fence, any stray dog can wander around the campus, dig through the trash, steal food from the cafeteria, or even bite somebody. If we have lost or never built up a portion of our boundary, then people and situations easily press our buttons and stir our emotions, maybe distracting us from maintaining focus on the things that bring us fulfillment in life. Have you ever been stuck in traffic? Did you ever see someone honk their horn, clench their fists, and get angry hoping that traffic will start moving faster? Did it work? No. They have just spent energy trying to control the uncontrollable and got nothing in return. They have been suffering over traffic, something that we cannot control. One way to reduce suffering is to give up the idea of should, as in traffic shouldn't be backed up today. I should have left earlier. The principal should give us a dress down every Friday. Don't pay attention to how people should be courteous or how your spouse should do this or that for you, how our students should submit every assignment on time. This is all just wishing for control. Instead of suffering, we need to focus our attention on what we do control. Control your attention. Turn it back to your dreams and ideals and practice using the skills that move you toward fulfillment and achieving those dreams. The personal boundary is also like a tank that holds our three inner resources: emotions, intellect, and decision-making. If the tank is rusty and has holes, the content leaks out and is wasted. When we are wishing and focusing on how people should be, we are burning energy attempting to exert control over others, thereby stealing their freedom from a hole in their boundary. We don't control forcing our ideas onto others. Trying to force ideas onto others wastes their time and ours when those ideas are not wanted. Time is the price we pay for conveying or hearing ideas. When a boundary has holes in it, our identity is undefined and vague in shape. We see this a lot in teenagers who are still finding their identity. What do you want to eat? Whatever. When do you want to leave? Doesn't matter. Do you want your friends to come? I don't know. So we ask this teenager 3 questions and we have no idea who this kid is or what they want. The way to shore up holes in boundaries is to have preferences, to say yes to what you want and no to what you don't want. This doesn't mean we will get what we want. It just means that we are able to have and voice preferences. Instead, if the teenager tells us that she wants to eat tacos at 6 a.m. with all of her friends, we have a much stronger idea of who she is. I mean, who else wants to have 6 a.m. tacos? The more preferences we have, the clearer our identity becomes. I am a yes to hip-hop and a no to country. A yes to pastel shirts and a no to khaki pants. A yes to dogs and a no to cats. With 3 simple preferences, we now have a clearer idea of who I am. A pastel shirt wearing, hip-hop listening dog lover. The weaker our identity, the more advantage people will take of us through the holes in our boundaries. The weaker our boundary, the more we allow others to make decisions for us. Decisions that may or may not be in our best interest. The more they can use and manipulate us with ideas that serve their interests at our expense. When we have a solid boundary and identity to go with it, the better protected from stress we are. The personal boundary is our first line of defense. When the personal boundary is capable of saying no and hearing no, we are better protected from stress. When a person has holes in their boundaries, stress can get inside of them whenever it wants. This kind of person only has good days because the environment is good, and always has bad days when the environment is bad. The uncontrollable environment has total control of people with holes in their boundaries. It's like having a beautiful house with no doors and no windows. When the sun is out and it's breezy, it's a good day. But when it is rainy and stormy, it is a bad day. Good, strong boundaries allow us to climate control our homes so that we more consistently feel the way we want to. I now have a story about grandma and grandson that helps to illustrate boundaries. Grandma comes to the doctor and says, "Doc, I have anxiety. Please give me some medication to calm my anxiety." The doctor asks her a few questions and learns that her grandson is a violent alcoholic, and when he is out drinking, drives home drunk, or is making a racket in the kitchen, she feels anxious. But when he is sober, she doesn't feel anxious. Medication cannot cure this anxiety. Trying to treat grandma with medication is like trying to treat grandson's behavior through her. The only cure for this anxiety is saying no to her grandson and making him find another place to live if he cannot commit to being sober in her house. This is what we call tough love, and this is what she found the courage to do. After she made him move out, she came back to the doctor again, feeling relieved, but also feeling sad. She said, "I want to be a good grandma. I don't want to see him hurting or living out on the street. He still calls me and makes me feel so guilty." Grandson found another way to get inside of her boundary, and we call this being manipulative. He found another hole in her boundary and shamed her through it. Guilt is something we feel inside when we know we have done something wrong, but she had not. Grandma's responsibility is to first ensure that her needs are being met and that she feels safe. Shame is an anxiety emotion from outside of ourselves that someone else sticks into us to relieve their own anxiety. Grandma has done nothing to deserve the shame. She is responsible for making decisions that leave her feeling safe. Grandma continues to suffer because she was displaying another trait of boundary holes. She felt like she was the whole world to her grandson, imagining in a way that she owned him, that all the troubles of his life were also fully her trouble and her responsibility alone rather than his. This is called denial, and denial is an illusion created by a boundary hole. Denial is not seeing the limits of our control. When we think about the edge of our boundary, we recognize the limits of what we own and control about our psychological territory. When we instead look out a hole in our boundary, we see off into infinity, not realizing that we are looking into psychological territory that is in fact not ours. We see territory that we imagine we own, control, and feel responsible for. Often when we do this, there are other people or goals beyond our control, and we get frustrated when we find that we don't really own or control them. Maybe you've yelled at someone for picking from your mango tree, not knowing that the mango tree was actually planted in your neighbor's yard. The mango tree is outside of your boundary, and therefore outside of your control. Students who walk off campus to smoke or vape understand this. They know that the principal doesn't control them outside the boundary of the school fence line, outside of the boundary of the school. Once again, grandma needed to practice saying no more often. No to grandson's calls in the middle of the night, no to his request for beer money, and no to anything else that makes her feel unsafe and uncomfortable. However, she also needed to realize that grandson's life ultimately belongs to him, not her. It is not grandma's sole duty to be the whole world to him. That is the world's job, a job for all the people. His girlfriend, his brothers, the police, his boss, and everyone else in the world who can point out his boundary holes to him in everyday life. On the other side of the coin, and equally as unhealthy, is the problem of having walls up. This is an easy trap to get caught in. We get hurt early and often in life and start saying no to everything. We don't allow intimacy or psychological trade to happen with anyone. Oftentimes, walls develop after a significant trauma, a big loss that overwhelms our ability to handle it. To be completely cut off from the environment is just as harmful as being completely vulnerable to the environment. Being a hermit is just as harmful as wearing your heart on your sleeve. A person with walls in their boundaries is like North Korea. No ideas or cultural exchange takes place. No trade in or out, and no assistance from the international community. A personal boundary has all the exact same features as the border of a country. It keeps bad things out, but must also allow good things in. Boundary walls are an example of a boundary that does not work well. A nation like this is isolated from the world community, just as an individual with this kind of boundary is isolated from the community. This situation is just as immature and unhealthy as having holes in our boundary. This leads us to doors. The mature personal boundary has doors rather than holes or walls. High health is to open your door to constructive, win-win, mutually beneficial ideas, emotional energy, and behaviors, and slam it shut on destructive win-lose ideas, energy, and behaviors. Have you ever known somebody who holds a grudge, or a couple that has a minor fight and then decides to break up over it? Of someone who says, my way or the highway? All of these people are using walls in their boundary instead of doors. If you think about the most mature relationships you know, you'll find that they are the ones in which two people can agree to disagree. If you think about how many people want their spouses to be mirror images of themselves and won't tolerate less, these people have all walls saying no to everything unique and different about their partner. And if you know people who tolerate any possible kind of behavior in their partner, these people have all holes in their boundary. People with doors in their boundary are able to stay committed to one another and yet decide to open the door to good, constructive behavior and close the door to bad, destructive behavior in their partner. The catch is they don't hold grudges. They are able to open the door up again when their partner changes back to doing good things or things within the first person's preferences. In ancient times, when there were battles, warriors could fight with a sword or with a shield. However, when the warrior used the sword, he found that he quickly tired out. Using his shield would protect him from the enemy, and he would not get tired, although his enemy would. The personal boundary is your shield in the world and in relationships. Say yes to win-win constructive deals and no to win-lose destructive deals, even if you're going to win. All human beings are sometimes constructive and sometimes destructive. Understand this. We can stop holding grudges and cutting potential friends out of our life because all people are capable of change and adaptation. With any relationship, friend, spouse, classmate, coworker, Imagine having doors and windows that can swing open to constructive behavior and close to destructive behavior. Commit over time to open, close to this person, all dependent on whether the immediate deal on the table benefits both of you and is constructive, or benefits only one of you and is destructive. Sooner or later, they will be your greatest ally or gone from your life. Either result is acceptable if you agree that suffering is not necessary. We do psychological trade with others every day. We have 3 psychological resources with which we can trade. We have self-esteem, or positive emotional energy, intellect or data, which we call information, and decision-making power. Love is the currency and exchange of self-esteem. Time is the currency or cost of exchange of intellect or information. Freedom is the currency or cost of giving away decision-making power. Sometimes we trade time for love, like when we read a story to our kids. We may trade freedom for time, such as when we become an apprentice or take an internship. We give up our freedom to learn about something important to us that saves us time in the long run. Finally, we can see that all of these things equal money if we have a job and are employed by someone else. We exchange a certain amount of our freedom if we have a boss. By definition, bosses make more decisions about us than we get to make. Of course, we also put our time and energy into the job and get a salary in exchange. Time is money, they say. But time is money, and freedom is money, and love is money, and love is freedom, and freedom is time, and money is freedom for some people. It is all just currency that we trade with one another. Whether you trade a particular one for a particular other all depends on those little things we call preferences. Only with a great, mature boundary can we get good deals in life. If you want a life that's fulfilling, the number one question you have to be looking at is, how do I spend my time? If you want to be an NBA basketball player, for example, but you spend more time playing video games than playing basketball, well, I've got news for you. There are many skills necessary to make it in the NBA, and they all take time to develop. Don't get me wrong. Video games can be helpful in terms of learning how to think about basketball, but if you want to be a basketball player, you have to be out doing it on a court and learning to do it at a high level with others who have had more success than you have had. If you want to get good grades in school, but you spend all your time in school avoiding your assignments and after school texting friends, you might not get the grades you want. Getting good grades in school isn't about being smart. It is about how you spend your time and where you focus your attention. Now, all of this plays an important role in relationships. Interdependence is the most mature function of boundaries in relationships, romantic, professional, family, or otherwise. When people first meet, in a romantic relationship, for example, they are still independent. They find that they have compatible emotional energy, similar ideas, and finally they start sharing decisions. They decide to go to the same date, marry in the same chapel, have the same kids. Now they are intimate and sharing emotions, ideas, and decision makings, combining their currencies and resources. However, if they remain stuck in intimacy, this is what we call codependence. Maturity demands that we be able to bounce back and forth between intimacy and independence, a state called interdependence. We are able to agree to disagree, able to go and do our own thing, but still have commitment. When two people become stuck in intimacy, they are seduced by the illusion of doubling the size of their boundary, their resources, and imaginary instantaneous growth. However, they have also lost the boundary between each other, and with it, lost the power to say no or tolerate hearing no from each other. When this happens, they find it hard to return to independence and still have a relationship. True commitment is missing from this particular system. Soon, one person finds themselves stronger than the other person and may start to hoard and control all the currencies for themselves. This is simple, fundamental human nature. We see what we want, it is freely available, and we take it. No boundary as marking it off as belonging to another person. Generally, the natural history of such a relationship is for one person to bully the other until most resources are gathered in the corner of the shared boundary. Finally, one partner ejects from the system when they have taken what they want. Codependence is the last thing you want in your relationships or marriage. For all the magic and imagination of romance, we cannot afford to not be ourselves. We all have a unique spirit and must always retain some sense of independence in our relationships if they are to work and withstand the test of time. As an immature system, and by definition, codependence is a win-lose situation. It creates the illusion of doubling the size of our boundary and an illusion that resembles success. But interdependence lets us relax, be honest with ourselves and others, and inevitably leads to the person or people that are right for us. Here is something to think about when you're assuming people have your back. Never put your happiness in someone else's hands. They will drop it every time. In all of your relationships, work, romantic, friendship, or otherwise, plan to stay in and plan to move on. Commit to making relationships work and understand it is very possible that they won't. Sometimes relationships fail through no fault of our own. Prepare yourself by continuing to grow and evolve in a way that is consistent with becoming the person you have always dreamed of becoming. Some will decide that they aren't willing to go on that journey with you, and this is okay. This doesn't mean the relationship was a failure, only that the experience is now complete and it's time to move on. The risk of falling into codependence underscores the importance of having a purpose in life. When you know with conviction the difference you want to make in the world, it is easy to eliminate relationships that don't serve the process of becoming the person we need to be to realize our vision of what is possible for us. In other words, to become the very best version of ourselves possible. Please note that this model is useful for understanding organizations, such as schools. We have boundaries, we have beliefs, values, and history. The school makes decisions, and there is an emotional climate in school. Success, reaching goals, and growing boundary size. When we approach a goal using our inner resources that we do control and reach it, it is not a goal anymore. We own the goal. We have expanded the size of our boundary, both physical and psychological. Graduating 5th grade is no longer a goal for any of us. We have achieved it. However, success doesn't necessarily equal happiness. Success is simply a bigger boundary where we have met our goals through using our intellect. The thing is that none of us just has holes or just walls or just doors in our personal boundary. We have a collection of all three. The point is to use our observing ego, our ability to observe ourselves in real time and make changes when we notice problems developing in our lives. So we're going to complete this portion of the training today, but before we do, I want to speak to a myth in our culture, the myth of time management. I hate to break it to you, but there is no time management. It doesn't exist. It is self-management in the face of time. Managing ourselves in the face of time is about setting boundaries and directing our decision-making. We'll have more on decision-making in the next section.